Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I'm Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Right, hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. I am so excited for today's guest. We are here with Veronica Novy, who is not new to survivingbreastcancer.org or the podcast Breast Cancer Conversations. She, in fact, was one of our first guests, maybe 5+ years ago, Breast Cancer Conversations, when we first met and we were both newly diagnosed and we were navigating everything. And you had a very popular episode, Veronica, on everything we need to know heading into surgery.
Yes.
And so that to this date, I still think has one of the most downloads on our podcast. So right away, you've gone viral. I am so excited to have you back on the podcast and to let our listeners know how you are doing now. So many times when we're diagnosed with breast cancer, it's like the immediate, it is overwhelming. We're just looking for like answers so we can get through day by day. And it's not often that we get to have someone back on the show like years later to say, okay, how are you doing now? And what has happened in between? Welcome to the conversation. I would love to have you introduce yourself, Veronica. You have such an incredible background, and I'm so thrilled that over these last couple of years, too, you've been able to volunteer with our organization, get really involved in our leadership team, and just really contribute in paying it forward. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for having me. And this is a momentous day for me because I do remember sitting in this very spot for that podcast. And I believe it kind of changed the dynamics of how I was feeling about living with a diagnosis of breast cancer. So I'll take you back a little. I'll give you a tidbit. I was diagnosed with stage 2B breast cancer back in 2018. And it was just a culmination of a lot of things that had gone, awry. My GYN had retired. I had a new job. And if it wasn't for a mobile van outside of my new job that I got tested on, I made an appointment. I went out there, and thus, I guess it changed the course of my life.
Wow.
But today, as a returning podcaster to, SBC, I'm happy to say I am really in a good place. I feel good today. I'm smiling. And a lot of times I'll even look at myself, in the mirror, and I'll say, wow, at least you're still smiling. And that brings me here today, and I'm happy to have this conversation.
So you've taken us through a diagnosis to fast forward today, you are smiling, but I know it hasn't always been like sunshine and rainbows for you. Right. Can you tell me a little bit about the middle?
Okay.
Kind of like the ups and downs as well.
Okay. Well, the ups and downs include, getting that original diagnosis and going to a place where I didn't know anybody, and the doctor who I didn't have an established relationship with, even before I was biopsied, she just blurted out, "You have cancer."
Oh my gosh.
I could have gone to my knees because I was there alone. I had to take 2 buses home, and she didn't even prepare me for that, So I went outside, I called my mother, and I told her, she said, "Just don't cry in the street." Because that makes you vulnerable. She said, "Get home, call me when you get home, and we'll talk about it." So that was one of the significant things that I remember. And I never spoke to that doctor again. But I've had, and I've always wanted to, alert the hospital of what happened to me. I said, just let me get on my journey. I'll worry about that later. So I made it through that. I would say some of the hard parts that didn't even have to be hard was, I was on my way to radiation one day, and we had the wrong address. I got kicked out of the Uber. I got kicked out of the car, and I said, "Sir, you're going in the wrong place. I'm supposed to go here." And he says, "Well, I don't know about that." He says, "You have to get out." It was 6:30 in the morning. It was freezing cold. I was alone in the neighborhood. Even though I'm a New Yorker, there's certain parts of town you just don't know. So I was stuck in this neighborhood and I had to stand outside for 1 hour to wait for the next car to come get me.
Gosh.
And what was traumatic was it was a medical service transportation company that dealt with people, who needed help, but he was so cold. I got over that. I had a small, I shed a tear, I went on, I finished my radiation.
Did your mother
And
know about this crying in the streets, girl? Did she know?
I know, because sometimes you keep things in, you don't tell people because,
Mm-hmm.
they were so far away. And I
Right.
didn't want them to, I eventually told them and I did report, that incident, so that was one of the difficult days. But I had a fantastic surgeon who did the mastectomy. To this day, I was sorry to hear that he no longer makes breast a priority, so he retired from that. So I no longer see him as well, but he had a significant positive, he got me through that difficult part.
That's really great. Did you have
Yeah,
a single or double mastectomy?
I had a single mastectomy,
Okay, so
and
you were able to keep your other breast?
yes, I was. I was.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm thankful for that. I've had a scare with my remaining breast as well, where they saw some cyst or some things like that. So I had to go for a biopsy for that in about 3 years ago. But thankfully, it turned out to be benign, but it's something we continue to watch.
Mm,
But
yes.
but I think having had that first surgery and what I went through, I tried to prepare myself. Said, Veronica, if it comes up that you have to have that one removed, I would just do it,
Mm-hmm.
and not go through so much trauma over that. But it turned out I was able to keep it, and here I sit today.
That's amazing. And there's no right or wrong, right? I love hearing everyone's kind of thinking patterns and trying to understand, you know, okay, I have the option to keep my breast. I also
Right,
have the option to do a double mastectomy because I don't want to have this scare in the future either. And so
right.
everyone's experience is a little bit different in how they come and arrive at those decisions. And it sounds like this was a really great decision for you where you were able to just focus on the cancerous breast, get that out, and then be able to maintain and keep part of your
Yes. And the only funny feeling is when you ultimately go for your mammogram. I had an implant in that breast, and it's like they got to work that implant up so they can look at your
mm,
tissue. And it's a weird feeling, but I've gotten through that. I've had at least, that the implant had been put in 2019, so I had a few mammograms since then. And, I just go and get through it.
And so you bring up a really great point. So the reconstruction that you had was with implants,
Yes.
and you still get a mammogram on that breast because there's still tissue they can scan.
Yes, yes, because there's still tissue there, and the breast size was never altered. It was lifted,
Okay.
and they tried to match it with my breast that was made for me with the deep flap. So I'm finally kind of even now.
So you ended up having a deep flap later on in your experience.
Yes, yes,
Let's talk about that a little bit. So you had like the implant, and then
yes.
was that? I always get the question too, like, is it comfortable? Is it uncomfortable? Can you tell me a little bit what it was like when you had the implant?
Well, I'll tell you, I went through at least 12 months of tissue expanders in 2018 to 2019, where they would, insert the solution and push it, trying to stretch the skin. So I did
Yes.
that for nearly a year. And then finally, I got an implant in that breast. And I have to tell you, the implant that was placed in me, I was never comfortable. For some
Mm,
reason, it sat up very high, and my plastic surgeon, he just said, "Well, it should drop.
okay.
It should drop." And originally, it never dropped, and he was gonna just go back in and do fat grafting to put fat around the circumference of the implant. But I never got to that point with him. I continued to go to him maybe twice a year, but I never had that ultimate follow-up surgery with him.
Sure.
So here we come to 2024, and I was able to make a connection with Memorial Sloan Kettering. and they accepted me as a patient because I had tried to go there before, but for some reason I wasn't accepted. But in 2024, I met a wonderful surgeon, and he said, "We're going to bring you in." They bring you in, they examine you. You have to take pictures, So you go to another room and you sit on this platform, and you've got nothing on but black bikini panties, and you're holding your arms out, and you're just standing there. And I guess you get to a point in this journey that, you learn to become, not let you're breastless, you're bare, you have no clothes on basically, and you try not to let it bother you. So I did receive the deep flap. And what can I say? Things that I remember, you get to the hospital so early in the morning that the staff isn't even there yet, but they want you there. And my cousins, my family, they took me, but they also left me there. Yeah, they also left me there. It happened to be the day that Microsoft went down, and we weren't allowed to operate until the computers came back up, thus making, it was already going to be a long procedure. The doctor really didn't tell me. I kept saying, "Doctor, how long is the procedure? How long is the procedure?" And he just said, "Veronica, don't worry, you're in good hands." And I was. I woke up. I think I finally went into surgery about 1:30, and I do recall waking up in recovery about 8:30.
Yeah.
And it was, as much as I like, after the fact, sometimes I think you get sad because I'm sitting in this hospital bed, happy because I got the reconstruction, but my family wasn't there to hold my hand. But I've got to tell you, the facility I was in, they made me feel, from everybody, from the nurses aide to the, my team, they make you feel that you matter and that they
Absolutely.
care about you. And that made it all, so much so that I did not feel so alone. They sent me home in an Uber the next day. You would not believe, you have an 8-hour procedure and you only get one night in a hospital.
I know. I know.
One
I know
night.
people who have had surgery for breast cancer and they go home the same day. It's
Yeah,
really wild.
it really is.
So, with the deep flap, did you end up having drains as well? You had deep flap just on the one breast?
I had D-flap on the one breast, but I ultimately came home with 3 ports.
Okay, 3 drains,
So
those JP drains, yes.
3 drains, and they're not the most fun things that you have to live with. I think mine were in for about 7 to 10 days, and you have to also measure the fluid, the morning fluid and the evening fluid, and bring that tally back to you in a week when you go back for your follow-up visit.
Yeah, I remember going through that as well. I had 3 drains also, even though I had a lumpectomy, um, and I had lymph nodes removed as well. So I had 3 drains. I remember doing the measuring, and they are very uncomfortable. It's probably like the worst, most uncomfortable, like annoying part of this
Yes,
procedure.
it is, because you're
Yeah.
allowed to shower, I think, a day or 2 later, but you have to hold those ports. You have to hold those things while you shower,
Yeah,
and you
super
don't you,
uncomfortable.
you don't want one of them to drop because they're stuck in your tissue.
Exactly. I think I got like one of those like lanyard strings that go around your neck. So I would like clip them onto
Yes.
that. But I'm like, this is like the weirdest
Oh my
experience.
gosh, it
Like, you
is. I
kind of
was
feel
so
unhuman.
happy. I felt so happy. Like, even this year when I went back for my second reconstruction, I think I just had the one drainage port, and I was tickled pink the day I said, "We're going to get it removed." And I was
Yes.
so thrilled. Now I can take a shower without having to hold this
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I was happy, to get that removed.
So even after your deep flap, you had another reconstruction.
I did. Okay, so let me tell you what happened. When they do the deep flap, they take tissue from your midsection. So they actually took about 3 sections of flesh from the left side of my stomach to the right side of my stomach. And that's how they built my breasts. But what
Mm.
happens is, I guess they took more tissue than they ultimately needed to create a breast. So a year later, the doctor says, "Well, because you could feel it, like, jugging out. So he just said, if it's, I could have lived with it if I wanted to, but I just wanted to be made to feel as good as I could. So he went back in and he removed some of the flesh. And again, I don't think he told me how long. I thought it was going to be 2 hours, maybe, or 3 hours, but it lasted at least, I think, 1:30 to 6:30. But he also had to, I got a new implant in my left breast. I got a bigger one, a fuller one. So he didn't really have to do the lift, you know. So finally, I'm at a point in my journey that I've been restored to, the breasts are even. The
Yeah, that's
breasts are
great. And can you
even
just
now.
clarify? So you have an implant and you also have natural tissue? Or
No,
they took the
well,
implant out?
the right breast is the reconstructed, the deep flap that they made from my flesh, from my tummy. And then the left breast, I had, originally they had put a small implant in the left breast to uplift it to be.
To do the lift. I see.
Yes,
Okay.
to do the lift. But
not because of the cancer.
Right. Not
Got it.
because
Okay.
yeah. So that was, so when I woke up, I had a lot of stitches on both breasts, and I looked like I had been through something. But you know what? A week later, it's like I didn't even know this was going to happen, though. But he brought the whole team in. The whole team came into the room, and of course, you have to open your robe. I just literally, I started shedding some tears, and I just said, doctor, though, it was worth it. I said it was worth every stitch, and I quickly, I dried my tears, but, everybody understood. They were learning. Those were his associates, and they were learning how to be a part of a team and to address, this particular surgical procedure. So I allowed them to, it was like 4 or 5, the gang's all here, but
exactly.
It worked out okay. And I got dressed and, I went and had lunch by myself. And I went home, and that was August 20th,
Of this year.
Yeah, of this year. So.
And how are you feeling now? Like, do you wear like special types of bras? Do you avoid underwire bras? Like how?
Okay. Well, right now, it's been a journey. We all know once you start having, procedures on your breast, both of them are not going to be that 34D or whatever. But
mine never were to start. So
okay. And I understand that, So I used to wear halter top bathing suit tops, because you could adjust the pressure on each side. So I was always able to make, even though the right breast stood up higher and the left breast was lower, with that halter top, I was able to make them even. But finally, I'm at a point now I can wear a regular bra.
Nice.
And and what I did find out, we've been told so much about underwire. I realized I did buy one, and I tried to open it, and it wasn't wire, it was plastic. Oh, so that made me feel a little better, because I was going to pull the wire out if it was metal, but it turned out to be plastic, and I just kept it in. Certain thing about underwires they make you look. There's a certain way that an underwire bra makes you look versus the non-wired ones, but they've come a long way in the production of bras that have no wire in them. And I'm happy about that. Like right now I have on a Calvin Klein racerback bra, and I love that because it kind of uplifts you as well.
Very
so
nice. And where the incisions were and everything, there's no irritation?
There's slight irritation, and now I have where he had to cut the flesh to cut away. I do have a scar right now. Ultimately, I imagine it's going to melt away. This particular time, the stitches, they were meltable, but they didn't melt right away. So I had to get used to the feeling of like something, I guess it's nylon thread or something, so I just have maybe one or two pieces of stitches that haven't melted away as yet. But I'll address that next week when I go see my surgeon.
Yeah. I mean, this is such an incredible story because, we always think, okay, we've been diagnosed with breast cancer. I always tell people when they're talking about surgical options, my question to me was like, how many actual surgeries do I need? Is this like a one and done, or do you think it's going to be a one and done? But unless you really like ask these specific questions, are there going to be expanders? Is there going to be an exchange surgery?
Mm-hmm.
Will there be a revision surgery? I mean, you might have like 4 just starting off the bat, and that's even if you don't have any complications. And so
Right.
really understanding what you're willing to put your body through, that you want to put your body through, and
Mm-hmm.
those could be some deciding factors. And then in your case, how much happy you are because the implant was so uncomfortable
Yeah.
that you decided later on to have this more invasive surgery, taking tissue from your abdomen. And so it's years later and you're still healing.
Yes, and it's quite, and it's also a difficult process when you are a single woman and you kind of rely on your sister and your mother to give you some kind of guidance, and you also rely on your surgeon, to guide you. But basically, for this last procedure, I had to make the decision myself, because family was like, well, why do you keep needing so many procedures? Because they too was thinking one and done.
Mm-hmm.
And then why can't you just live and go flat or something like that? And it's not something that you can think of in just 1 minute or 1 hour. It's a process, that you
Yeah.
have to come to these conclusions. And my mantra was always that I didn't ask for any of this, but I'm going to do everything that I can to make myself whole. And that's where I stand today, So, I'll go into surgery and I'll do what I have to do, to get right,
Yeah.
to get right.
You bring up such a great important point. I had a similar experience
Hmm.
when I remember talking to friends who did not have cancer about my decision to have a lumpectomy versus a mastectomy.
Right,
And it was this group of girls, like, it's just very chatty, friendly. And it was just so interesting how all of a sudden, all of them were like, well, if this were me, I would do a double mastectomy, no questions asked. Or like, and I actually got really upset because
yeah,
I was like, easy for you to say when you haven't been diagnosed with cancer.
thank you, right,
It's one thing just to say, oh, this will be a simple choice, but it is not a simple choice when you're in this environment. And so I'm sure they were trying to like make me feel comfortable having this dialogue. And in
right,
fact, it made me realize how much more education we need to do, even as we're coming upon Breast Cancer Awareness Month, talking about, how do we speak about lumpectomies and mastectomies when this isn't necessarily your choice? This is your lifeline.
right. You know, for me, I kept my decisions kind of secret. I didn't really discuss them with friends. The doctor laid it out for me. He says, I think you're going to have to get the breast taken off because, I had 2 tumors growing, so even when I went for my biopsy, I had to be biopsied in 2 separate places in my breast.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of things they don't tell you about, Laura, and I don't know if this happened to other people, but the day I had my mastectomy, they had to give me 4 needles in my breast. And for the life of me, I just said, well, I guess they don't tell you because they know you might run scared, but I was already in the prep room to get ready for the procedure. And they said, and the nurse, all she did, I couldn't even go back, run out and get a hug from my sister, but, thank goodness there are people in healthcare that really care
Mm-hmm.
about the people they serve. And she just gave me a hug,
That's
and
nice.
I got through it somehow. I said, you're taking
Yeah.
my breast off and you still got to give me an injection in it, but yeah, but I got through that and I'm really loving how I feel with the reconstruction and I would do it again. I would do it again if I had to, you
Feeling
know?
comfortable and confident with your choices. I'm really happy to hear this side of the story.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So go ahead.
So I want to ask kind of like, as we gotten to the end here of like major, like what piece of advice would you give to somebody right now who's listening and heading.
Okay. For me, I would say I think I was a lot naive when this came upon me. And when I think back, I did not know how to ask particular questions. So we're going back to 2018. I was brought in. The doctor said this, and that. And I just sat there kind of like in an awkward position. And I just wanted to cry. But, so I wish I had a known to just ask more questions, do more research, because that's my personality, is to do research and ask questions. But, I also can say that I learned as I went on. If I didn't know something, I would go home, I'd look it up, and I would try to learn as much as I could. Whereas, so then when I went back to the doctor, then I would have questions to ask of him.
Absolutely. And that's
So
one of the important pieces of survivingbreastcancer.org, that we really try and focus on the education piece on our website, and I'll put them in the show notes as well. We have PDFs people can download, so questions to ask your surgeon, questions to ask your oncologist, and then questions to ask your radiologist.
yes.
So again, we have never gone through this before, so how are we supposed to know what to ask?
I know, because I recalled my oncologist, he just stood there and he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I didn't know what to ask.
Right.
At that time, hindsight, I would have asked him, a little bit more personal questions, how is life going to be, after, and the ultimate effects of chemo on my body. But I just, whatever he said, I listened, and, I went with it, and I got through it. I got through it somehow.
Sometimes ignorance can be bliss if you
I
don't
think
know.
so. I think so.
Yeah.
And I think I'm in a good headspace. We often talk about who's going to be there, who can be there for you. And at the end of the day, I think we still have to just think positive and be there for ourselves, because, friendships will come and go to aid you through. But you've got to find it deep within yourself to just bring yourself through this. And then here I stand today, 2018.
Smiling.
Yeah.
Smiling.
And it's real. It's real. And I got to tell you, like, I probably didn't tell a whole lot of people when I first got diagnosed. I felt ashamed. And I was like, "Oh, Lord, breast cancer?" I thought I had done everything right too in my life. I didn't use deodorant with aluminum hexachloride. I didn't eat a lot of red meat. And so when this came, I was like, okay, I thought I was living, so on. And that's something that we could look forward to in the future, I think, about eating right and not maybe blaming ourselves for it, because we'll never
100%.
we'll never know why we got it.
Cancer is not anyone's fault. It is not your fault. It is not my fault. It is not our listeners' fault.
Right.
Unfortunately, we are in this weird society where we feel shame and we feel blame. And if there's something, like, I had a really hard time thinking my body failed me. I'm like, what the hell happened?
I
Like,
know.
I was healthy. I was working out. I was following the rules. And you guys decided to go rogue on me. And I think that was really hard to, like, have that connect and disconnect.
Yes.
And then to be confronted with putting something so toxic in our body like chemotherapy. It's like, well, now this is what you get. And so, right? Like, it's
My
so
goodness.
challenging.
It is. And then when you think what chemotherapy actually is, it's a chemical, and it's got to kill, but it works, right?
It does. Yes.
It works.
Yes.
So
the medicine
you
is
do
incredible.
You do it. And, and we somehow, we do it and we get through it.
We do. Veronica, thank you so much for sharing your story, giving our listeners an update. So I'll be sure to put the original podcast in the show notes so people can hear the beginning and then hear where you are today, which I think is just so incredible. Is there any last piece of, like, wisdom that you would like to share that we haven't talked about?
Well, I had to learn to finally put myself first. All my life, I'm a Taurus, and, kind heart, giving, want to make sure everybody's comfortable. But I recently realized that I have to surrender some of that giving to others and focus on myself. And that's the piece that I'm coming away with, even this week in my life, if somebody's in your life and they're not for you, and you know you're living with cancer, you can't give another minute to that negativity. Focus on yourself and just think of the good that will come in your life. And that's where I'm at today.
I love that. That is so beautiful, Veronica. Thank you so much for sharing this and those words of wisdom. Such a beautiful person. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Laura.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast is from personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you are looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Our show is made possible by our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, and by our incredible donors like yourself. You can hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org to sign up for our mailing list, make a donation, and explore the 400+ programs we offer each year at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. Until next time, keep on thriving.